and not a
Hmm.
problem to be solved. And when
Hmm.
you'll be willing to hear their story, all of it, and some of it may be a big surprise to us, there may be trauma,
Hmm.
there may be all kinds of stuff. When we're willing to listen to that and they feel heard and
Hmm.
seen, and that's going to be a pivotal time in the family.
So, welcome to Thrive While Loving an Addict. We are very fortunate today to have somebody who is from Tennessee with us today. I was actually on his podcast, Positive Sobriety, about 3 or 4 years ago. That's how we met. And it was a really fun, delightful conversation. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And so now we have a podcast that is for the loved ones, that audience. And so I thought it would be really great to have David back. He is an author, he's a certified professional recovery coach, he's a speaker, he's very involved in that community and has been for a long time. And probably wise beyond his years. And so lived a lot of life. And so I want to welcome you, David, today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I always appreciate getting to be a part of things and talk about things that I hope people can find some experience and hope and
Hmm.
joy.
Great. Well, before we got on, we were talking a little bit about families. So let's just jump into that right away because our podcast is geared for the loved ones and we have our own mess going on. And so what we were talking about was the notion that if you have somebody in your family that is dealing with substance use disorder, you basically just want them fixed. And so you're going to put them in rehab or you're going to take them to a counselor or you're going to do whatever you can to get them fixed, and you don't necessarily think about your side of the aisle or your part in the equation and all of that. So if you could speak a little bit to that, that would be, I think, really great for our
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah, as I was telling you, it ends up almost not comical, but it's an ironic kind of feeling because the family system comes in, and as you said, they want this identified person, the identified problem, so to speak. They want that addressed. They want that person to get better, fix him, tell him whatever it is he needs to know. The
Hmm.
sooner the better, by the way. It might take 3 or 4 visits, right?
Right, right.
And then send him home and let him play nicely with the rest of us. He or she then will know how the rest of us operate, and they can come home and play into the family system without any disruption to the family. First things I tell anybody, the person trying to get sober or the family and the loved ones around that person, is that sobriety is disruptive because we love the happy, joyous, and free part that the recovery rooms talk about. But before that, it's disruptive. I have a friend that says, the truth will set you free, but not before it beats the crap out of you, basically.
Yeah, you're right. Right.
And so I said, this person is going to experience, if we go down this road, they're going to experience themselves, their awakening to themselves. They're going to experience that they have opinions they didn't even know they had, probably feelings about certain things they didn't know they had. They're going to ask a lot of questions about things, the way they're affected by things around them, including the family and their
Right.
loved ones. And some of it's going to really rub up against the way we operate as a family. We've got to be open to talking about our story with this person in light of their sobriety and through the new lens that they're seeing the world in. Because when we take that bubble wrap off, whatever that
Hmm.
anesthesia has been, they're going to bump into them. And they're not
Hmm.
contentious, they're just feeling for the first time in a long time,
Right.
maybe ever, and identifying what they feel and learning to do that. And so that's a healthy thing. They're getting healthier, but the family very often is in the wings, and this mom still wants to maybe, let's say, overfunction, or dad still wants to remain in this emotionally distant place and just kind of
Hmm.
let things play out and don't bother me with all the details with it. In a kind of traditional sense, maybe siblings have all taken on a role in this somewhere. And there may
Right.
be addictive behaviors in the family, parents, other siblings that are going on co-occurringly. And that's another piece of it that everybody kind of is played down. You can talk about with this person we're bringing you,
Mhm.
but don't talk about my wine habit at night or what dad does in the office after everybody's in bed and he never seems to go to bed till 3 a.m. and all that stuff. Can't mess with any of those. We just need you to behave yourself. I've told people the person you're bringing me is a story to be heard, not a problem to be solved.
Oh, say that again, David. That's really
Yeah,
good.
this person is a story to be heard and not a
Hmm.
problem to be solved. And when
Hmm.
you'll be willing to hear their story, all of it, and some of it may be a big surprise to us. There may be trauma,
Hmm.
there may be all kinds of stuff. When we're willing to listen to that and they feel heard and
Hmm.
seen, and that's going to be a pivotal time in the family. And so this isn't about just bringing him in and let's talk about drinking or using or whatever for an hour. We're going to talk about why the pain, not why the problem. We all know the problem. It's gone on for years, but why
Hmm.
the pain? Where did the pain start? When did it quit being okay to be you? You know,
Right.
and
Right.
that kind of stuff. And that in
Yeah.
usually the relationships that are closest to that person. And sometimes the people that violated those relationships are within that circle. You're dealing with a lot of secrets. You're dealing with a lot of, potentially anyway, you're dealing with a lot of agreements everybody's made, the unspoken contracts that families all have. This is the stuff we'll share with each other. This is stuff we don't talk about. This is the stuff you can't hack off mom or dad about. I mean, we've all got that histories. When you bring the piece of addiction into it, there's all the stigma you were mentioning, before we recorded, the
Hmm.
stigma that families feel and loved ones
Hmm.
feel because nobody wants to talk about the fact that we are living in a situation that some people would judge us for, whether they think we're
Hmm.
over functioning or because they think we're enabling or because, and we're just trying to love somebody and keep them alive the best way we know how. And
Hmm.
maybe not always successfully, but yeah, it's a dance.
Yeah, I was thinking about the families think that, and I experienced this because my mom was addicted to prescription medications and my brother ended up being a cocaine addict. And I was thinking that my dad, who you were talking about, he was the emotionally detached guy. And we didn't talk about this. I found out years later that my mom had had a nervous breakdown and about her
Mm.
being prescribed by a psychiatrist and so on and so forth. My brother, I was actually, in real time growing up with him, and he kind of just sucked all the energy out of the family and it all kind of went towards him. And so I was trying to figure out, like, well, I was the oldest. So I kind of took the typical oldest responsible one kind of position. And I was like, well, who's going to be the adult in the room here? And as it turned out, years later, I ended up helping my brother get into rehab. And so we never did have conversations that were what I would call courageously authentic or even authentic around any of this. So I was left to kind of my own devices. And I got a counseling degree and I've gone on to do lots of work and to understand my own journey and my journey in that and reframing the stories around it because I just wanted to be a better human. And then I had the experience with my son, Sam. So it's been a lifelong journey and lots of bits and pieces. And you kind of described just your complexity of
Mhm.
all these little humans that are in the room. And they're all kind of aiming at the one who's dealing with substance use disorder, thinking if you just fix him or her, we're
Mhm.
all good.
Yeah, I always tell people that the person who's dealing with the dependency, the addict, let's say, for lack of a
Hmm.
better way to put it, is the whistleblower, really.
Right. Bingo.
They're the
Hmm.
one that is calling BS on everything. And this
Hmm.
doesn't work. This isn't how this is. And they're just very ready to tell everybody that, throw the sheets back and let's look at this whole big ugly mess. And man, I very often I think that's why there is sort of an animosity toward that person. It's not always because they're in their disorder and they're disruptive.
Hmm.
It's that it's just really revealing.
Yeah, they've kind of called the question. They've raised the red flag. And back when I was growing up, which was in the late 50s, 60s, this just was not handled well, period. And so there were a lot of secrets and a lot of not talking. And so it has changed considerably from that perspective. But also what we were talking about, off camera was with this show, I'm much more able to get people who are in recovery to talk and less likely to get family members to talk, whether you're a sib or whether you're a spouse or whether you're a parent or whatever, because there's still so much shame around having a family member that's dealing with substance use disorder.
Right. Yeah, it is. And parents and families, I think, all compare what they know from themselves from the inside to what they see on the outside of everybody else and assume that, everybody's Christmas card letter looks like that's what's really going on.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure
Hmm.
everybody doesn't walk around in a white outfit on the beach 24 hours a day.
Well, I think just that one notion, I remember kind of learning that I think the illusional stories dropped, thinking that we were the only ones. And then finding out years later that, oh, heck no, almost everybody is dealing with trauma and issues and generally speaking, not handling them well. Is why we have a plethora of different addictions that people use to numb themselves and self-soothe and do all of those things. So,
Yeah, I just spoke with a mom maybe 2 evenings ago, and she's in her early 80s, and her son
mm-hmm,
is 50-ish, and
mm-hmm,
he has kind of secluded himself in a hotel again and gone back to hiding and drinking and other behaviors. And she said that she felt like every time she helps him, her
mm-hmm,
friends give her a big speech. Well, you're enabling and you're doing this and you're doing that. And she said, I don't know what to do, but
right.
I'm convinced that if I don't do anything, he's going to die.
Mm-hmm,
And so if I help him, I just quit telling my friends. I just pretend like he's doing okay. He's doing better. And he's not. But I don't tell them the truth because they're going to judge me. And because I don't know what else to do, I'm doing the thing I did. And it may not be the perfect thing, but all I'm trying to do is keep him alive.
right. Yeah. I mean, it's just a really awful position to be in where you end up being isolated yourself because you don't have anybody that isn't going to judge you. And you're trying to figure out, what do I do in this situation? And it's more complicated when we have adult children that we can't control, we can't fix, we can't change, So how do you love somebody in the midst of witnessing their suffering? With boundaries. I'm not a big believer in, just the notion of you just need to kick them out and tough love. I don't like that. I think it's a way to let ourselves off the hook, and it's cruel. And learning to love with boundaries is, for most people, a big lift.
Yeah. I tell people very often when you're just really kind of at the end of your rope, you can tell this person, I love you and I'm here to support you, but I need for you to tell me what support would look like. And then we're going to have to agree or disagree about what that is. And let the person who's struggling tell you what they might think they need. Maybe, and I don't mean if they just think they need money. Again, I need you
Right.
to give me your credit card or something, something.
Yeah.
But what would help look like for you? What are your terms
Mhm.
for help? Is that even on your agenda that you could agree to? Okay, maybe rehab's not it, but would you consider this? Maybe it would look like this as step one, and
Mhm.
not the perfect world. Swoop in, intervene, sit in a circle, throw some rocks, and haul them off. And that's a terrible generalization. I know there are many successful interventions, and there
Interventions, yeah.
but
Mhm.
sometimes they're not. Sometimes families take it upon themselves to do what they think an intervention looks like, or because it looks like something they've seen on TV isn't always the classic best. And those things aren't, we don't need to invite this person to a shaming circle and hope we shame them into a better place. I think that we need to see what is going on in their head. What does support look like for you? And here's what I can agree to, and here's what I can't. Can you agree to
Mhm.
this? Could we do that? It may not be the perfect first thing, but just because you get him in rehab, we all know 5 or 6 times is average, and 12 and
Mhm.
14 times isn't likely.
That's what Sam was, 12.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And boy, you can't sell that at the brochure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think our system is not set up for a recovery, generally speaking. But there are enough places now where people can go to for extended periods of time that are a longer program, which is what Sam found in Raleigh, which was an extended program. So he could get his brain start to come back and him be in a structured situation over time. But I would say in Sam's situation, I think this is another thing that families think. They're waiting for the bottom and they think it looks a certain way. And our experience is it never looked the way I thought it was going to look, over and over and over again.
Yeah,
Because our bottom is not at all in the realm of their bottom, usually.
right. Yeah, because there's always the belief that I'm going to stop tomorrow, or I'm going to do it differently this time,
Hmm.
or maybe if I just change all these other things, I won't have to quit. I mean, the addiction has a great way of trying to protect itself. If it were
Exactly.
caricature of its own making. It would be this, I kind of look at it like an entity that is just, I had a friend that always used to say it's the disease that keeps telling me I don't have a disease. And so the thing just is set up to kick the can down the road just a little bit longer. And the bottom, I don't know what the bottom is for a lot of people. I mean, in my world, the bottom is death. I don't want anybody hitting rock bottom, and I don't want to wait on rock bottom. And families ask me all the time, well, maybe this is his rock bottom. And I'm like, I don't know. I've seen rock bottom in some folks. I don't want that for your loved one. And I'd rather let's find some ways to all get on the same team and avoid rock bottom. I mean, I think we've scraped at the bottom here for quite a while. I mean, I don't think there's any illusions that this is success, but yeah.
Yeah. So I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and I was kind of struck by the notion that all of our work, whether we're in the substance use arena or we're somebody who loves someone, is an inside out job.
Yeah, we all think changing the behavior then will change the inside of the motivation, and therefore clarity will come, and we'll work it that way. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's these realizations that suddenly make you realize that you have something that you actually want. You want to live a different life. You want, maybe I, for the first time, believe I deserve a better life than I'm on. And when did it get to be okay to do this? When did it get to be okay to settle for that? And going inward, I have people all the time that will tell me, usually people coming in some stage of addiction, and they'll say, I thought we were going to talk more about my drinking or my using.
Right.
I'm like, well, we can talk about it, but I think you've got that down pat, frankly. I don't think you really need much input on that. You do seem to be doing really well with it.
Right.
Maybe you have a not drinking problem. Maybe that's not a drink. But it is that thing where you begin to really probe and you want the story. I want to know underneath the causality and the ways that, when did you first learn that even checking out of your reality felt better than being in it?
I think on the loved one side of the equation, I think the way that I'm thinking about this is we get stuck in the anger part. We're mad because this is happening. And that's partly where we get stuck. And so that's another inside out job. We have to deal with, okay, where is that coming from? And why is that rearing its head? And why are we stuck on that place? Or because most people have their lives hijacked by this disease, whether it's, somebody who's using or whether it's somebody who loves somebody, is we kind of give our lives away to the person who has the disease. And I'm a big one, and through my own journey with Sam, began to realize was I wasn't going to let his disease hijack my life. Certainly it's a part of this whole equation, but I still loved my life. So I wanted to be able to laugh and have joy and have fun and do the things that brings me joy and in my life, even when Sam was struggling.
And that, I think, is actually, I think that's awesome. That I wish I could bottle that and give it to lots of people. The willingness to do that, the permission to do that, the self-permission. And in many ways, that frees the struggling person from the idea that in order for mom to be okay or dad to be okay, I've got to toe this line when I'm, in fact, not in that place at all. And I can be more honest with them because I'm not going to wreck their life by telling them the truth, because they seem to be able to handle this, at least without it becoming their identity for them. And I think it's more freeing for the person that's trying to get the help.
Yeah, that's my understanding is, I think with Sam, I know he worried about me, even in the midst of his disease. And that kept him, I think, more hijacked by having that layer of concern, worry. I think it feeds the shame of the disease. And I wanted him to know that I actually do have a great life. I still went backpacking every summer. I still spent time with friends and did things that bring me joy. At the same time, I was consistent in showing up and telling him he's loved and taking him to get a meal, no matter what was going on. And so giving ourselves permission to still have our lives, even when the stakes are incredibly high, which they are. And they're more high now because of fentanyl than at any time when I was growing up or, those kinds of things. And so we think if the stakes are higher, we need to work harder at fixing them. And I know that's a hard leap to get clear about. That's actually not true.
Right. And I work with a lot of adult kids and families that where one or the other parents have really overfunctioned in their lives. I mean, they're still, as the writer Anne Lamott says, chasing them around with sunscreen and chapstick at 30,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
And their way, they're sort of in a trained dependency many
Mm-hmm.
times. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're waiting on mom and dad to fix this. They're waiting on mom and dad to tell me what to do and to function with me in this and to get in this. And this is what I'm going through. So this is what you're going to go through with me, because you've always chased me and you've always told me where to aim my guns and fix
Mm-hmm.
my stuff and gotten me jobs because I didn't really know how to do it and all these things. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, when a parent says, I am going to take responsibility for my own happiness, my own life, and go back to doing the things I enjoy and go back to doing the friends that I've maybe avoided. And like you said, take my trips and do my stuff. And I'm here to support you in the way that I can, in the extent that we're able to agree on what that is. And here are my offerings for you. And then not feel disloyal about going out into the world and having your life. I mean, I've seen families really sacrifice a lot of even livelihood at the feet of this kind of a situation. And it doesn't benefit anybody at
Mm-hmm.
that point. But yeah, I mean, I think that permission that it's okay to have your life. It's okay to be the person that gets to laugh and have a get together at your house and do your stuff.
There are a number of Facebook groups, pretty much for a lot of moms. And one day I posted on one of them and I said, does anybody in here think that you can thrive in the midst of this disease, loving somebody who has this disease? And pretty much I got a absolutely not. And so I was like, wow, okay, well, then that means you're giving your life up too. And I was like, I'm not willing to let the disease do that. I don't
Right.
know how that serves.
Yeah, and your own emotional health. You've got to do the things that bring you joy. People forget that that's even part of their own well-being. So, and I don't doubt that you probably got that response, because there's sort of there's just this disloyal feeling that somehow, if you've got this loved one suffering, how can you go off and take part in something else?
Right. I think it's an immensely courageous act to be able to love somebody while they're in suffering. And so for me, that was part of the higher calling in this experience.
Hmm.
Was I'm a big believer in, no matter what's going on, to look for the gifts and lessons and opportunities for growth,
Hmm.
no matter what's happening. And by living into that question, the notion of being able to love him with boundaries, to love him in the midst of his suffering. And it sounds weird, but almost get comfortable with that's the disease. And so I can't change that that's the disease.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at families who have chronic illness in other ways, something
Mm-hmm.
shows up in a more medically based way. They've got a disabled loved one in the house, or someone's just gotten a terrible diagnosis, and it's all hands
Right.
on deck to figure this out. But even
Right.
in the midst of really chronic, ongoing stuff that families go through, they'll be told by their medical team, you guys are going to have to tag team this. And
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to take your weekend away. And some of you are going to have to still go to the beach. And some of you
Mm-hmm.
are still going to have to do these things, because
Mm-hmm.
caregiving in that sense
Mm-hmm.
is daunting, exhausting, and again, a very lonely
Right.
place where people just become very withdrawn, and it all becomes about how to support this individual that's struggling with recovering from whatever, if they are recovering
Right.
at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a thing though that they get a lot of support, I guess is my point. Since the permission from the community treating the loved one. You've got to go out and tag team this, get support around you, get some people that can come together with you and take you into this place and get someone to stay with this person for a bit and
Mm-hmm.
all that. But boy, in the world where there's somebody suffering with addiction at home, or even away from home, but we're making a revolving door with home or something, there's not a lot of casseroles for that.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that lost her son to an accidental heroin overdose, and she said, I didn't get the casserole people very much
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
nobody knew
Mm-hmm.
what to say to me. And so she said, we got condolences and we had friends that good friends that were with us and around us. But the parade of fried chicken that we do down here in the South anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It didn't happen.
yeah, it's not there. So
Yeah. Well, it's one thing that we don't, as a society, know how to handle death very well anyway, but this has extra layers of shame and stigma attached. And I think, generally speaking, most people are dealing with this in some form or fashion, whether it's a friend or a family member. And still, we're not having enough conversations to be able to hold the space for each other.
yeah, there's a lot of expectation that I'm going to find some kind of meaning in it, or that I'm going to find some kind of purpose in it. And maybe there is in some cosmic ultimate way, who knows? But I don't think you have to like it. I don't think it's okay. I don't think it has to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can be pissed off at that person that died in that sense. And
Mm-hmm.
not even because they necessarily could help that in themselves, but just
Right.
that this had to be where we went. And because I live in this Bible Belt, and don't even get me started on that.
I did my master's degree in the Bible Belt. I know about the Bible
Okay, well,
Belt.
then you are welcome to chime in.
We, yeah, I was in the highest suicide county in the country.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a revelation.
Yeah, it's a culture. It's a
Yes.
culture of its own. And I get so many people coming in, and I've told people, I don't know how many times, I said, you need to really stop trying to be a good Christian and just admit how you feel about this.
Yeah.
Quit
Yeah.
trying to perform and quit trying to, let's just put what we think we should feel, think, believe. That's all fine. But right
Hmm.
now, that's getting in between you and your ability to be honest with yourself.
Right.
So we'll get back to, whatever a good Christian is. I'm not sure I know, but anyway, we'll get back to that later. And right now, I'd love for you to just yell the nastiest word you can out your sunroof and call it prayer.
Yeah. Yeah. God can handle it.
You can handle it. I believe that I'm sure there's been worse things said.
Yeah, I think for me, what you're really poking at there is the mask, how we think we should look and feel and act
Right.
in the midst of a really, really challenging, tough, traumatized, destructive situation. And the judgments that come from this is who you need to be, this is how you need to act, is destructive in and of itself.
Yeah, it is, because then you get families that feel like they're torn between what their heart is telling them and then what they're going to have to perform in order to maintain their support system.
Right.
And, my support system says I should do this, and my heart's telling me that's not best for us. And so there's this tension that it creates. And I think every addiction story is different in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. I mean, there are a lot of similarities, certainly. Like I said before, sometimes I think the same script is being read by different people
Right.
a day, but very much a different dynamic. It is not a one size fits all approach.
No.
I can't tell people that if you'll go to this and do that and read this and spend this much time in this, you're going to suddenly not want to do this.
Right.
And if you're waiting on the day you think you want to stop, you're going to have a long wait.
Yeah. And so I think this was really illuminating for me in the early days. The first time Sam got in rehab, I thought, oh, okay, great. We're good. And then it was the second, the third, the fourth, the sixth, the 10th. And so each time I felt like I needed to go through a process of understanding. And I finally, for me, the realization that I kind of came to was this is his journey. I have my own in the midst of this, and I don't begin to know how his journey is going to go, but at least I grabbed onto the notion that every time he went into a rehab, he was grabbing somehow some piece of information or some knowing about himself or the disease that he was going to pull forward with him. And so for me, it felt like, okay, rehab, relapse, rehab, but we came up a little higher the next time, relapse. We came back up a little higher the next time. And that is actually what turned out to be when he and I have talked through the years, but certainly now he's been clean and sober for 2 years now. So he has a clearer perspective on his own journey.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things we have to be really honest with people about too, in those of us that are working with people in this situation, is that
Mhm.
relapse is part of recovery.
Yes.
I want to see people have fewer and further apart episodes, of course, and
Hmm.
I'd love for the first timers to just rule the world on this, but they don't, you know?
Mm-mm.
And so the reality, just to help people with their expectations and understand
Right.
if there's a slip or a relapse, let's not go to all or nothing thinking.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
you didn't take anything away from treatment. Well, you didn't take anything away from that 3 month camp you were at, and you didn't take anything away from. Well, no, you don't know that. I mean,
Hmm.
there's been a lot of effort here, but there are still these things that the levers get pulled and things happen and people succumb to that impulse again.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a quarter for every time I heard somebody say, we're back to square one, which I never believed. It was never a square one again. It was an up level. And partly, David, I think that it is just, we're not all that versed in the journey of life. And as I'm approaching 70 and I look back over all the things that took place in my life, I have jokingly said, I didn't tell the same story about my growing up in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, or my 60s. It kept evolving. And I kept evolving into how it has served me in the work that I do today. But the story kept changing because I kept being open to the changing of the story.
Yeah. Well, I think the older we get, the more likely we are to tell ourselves the truth. I hope. And
Yeah,
those of us that are at least had to really dig in and do the work and figure it out, life has taught us that it's not predictable and it's not like the brochure. And everybody's everybody's got a little bit of a different path. It's not a straight line. And there's a lot of zigs and zags. And what was true for me at 30 has not been true at 50 or 60. And I think we learn the freedom in telling the truth to ourselves. And if we can tell ourselves the truth first, then we can
mm-hmm.
share that truth with other people. But I tell people all the time, they'll say, my a daughter who's dependent on whatever, she lies. And I'm like, well, of course she does. But I said she's telling herself a lie first.
Right,
And so
right.
there's no way she's going to tell you altogether the truth
Mhm.
about who and how she is. And she may not know.
Yeah, I think the Sam that I know and the disease of his addiction, they're two different things. And the disease lies. It manipulates. It does all these things because the disease has taken first position in their brains in terms of survival. Well, who wouldn't do some of the things that people do that we think is like, what? And so if we can get that knowing, I think it helps us be a little freer.
Yeah, and helping the people like Sam empower their best selves
Yes.
to talk back to that other part of themselves. Because like I said, that disease, that addiction, that disorder is an entity of its own. It's got its own story it tells.
Right.
And when we can empower that person to speak against it, to speak back to it, then we're doing something. But I think that same really holds for families. The story
Yes.
of yourself may not altogether be the story here. It's a convenient one sometimes, hopefully, it absolves me of any responsibility as
Hmm.
person in the loved one's seat on the bus. But if we could keep the spotlight on this individual, like I said a while ago, we
Hmm.
can keep the interest and the speculation off of us.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the patient is as much the family as it is the struggling person, I think.
I totally agree. I think, I had I had a guest on not too long ago. He said, we're all addicted.
Yeah.
And I said, I think you're right. We're all addicted in some form or fashion. And so the one who's dealing with substance use disorder, like you said earlier when we started, was they're just raising the red flag and giving all of us an opportunity to do the work
Mhm.
in our own personal lives and get to our truth and heal from whatever we've been through and what we're going through, and to be able to hopefully move towards a life that we can love.
Yeah. I think that's well said.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we're coming up against the edge of our time. I know you've got to run. So let me just ask you this. What two books have you written that people should know about?
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I
Hmm.
wrote a book quite a while back called Our Authentic Selves, Reflections on What We Believe and What We Wish We Believed. And
Hmm.
it was aimed at more of a faith-based recovery group at that time. And I was actually trying to say that I think we're actually living out of what we wish we believe much more than what we really believe, because
Yeah.
diversity really reveals what we truly believe and doesn't change our beliefs. It just reveals what we really maybe think. And it's okay to let's go there and let's talk about that and admit that. But that's kind of that
Hmm.
little, it's about a 40-day little 500 word entries thing that's available. And I have a more recent one called After the Miracle: Illusions Along the Path to Restoration. And that's
Mhm.
really my own kind of story and getting sober from alcohol and living through a very long chronic illness. My wife
Yeah.
passed away,
Hmm.
and trying to talk about the disruption of sobriety. Question of do you want to be well is a big part of that book, and what is well
Mm.
really looking like, and comes with a lot of disruptive aspects.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you and I appreciate your podcast.
And I appreciate
And
doing and the voice and the resource you're offering people who really have very few, honestly.
mhm.
That's a very important thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you for your time, your spirit, your work in the world, and for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. Okay. Take care, everybody.